Hello, everybody, and it's Tuesday afternoon where I am. It's about Tuesday lunchtime, is it, Andre, where you are?
Yeah, just 11 a.m.
Oh, okay, so just before lunchtime. It's
Yeah.
a early lunch, depending on how early you Canadians eat. I have no idea. No doubt there'll be plenty of maple syrup involved, stereotypes aside, but we'll come to that in a minute. And I want to speak to you
Yeah.
about the trophy as well and some of the award ceremony in Montreal. And the reason why I highlight the award ceremony in Montreal in particular is because Andre was there in a professional capacity, doing usual stuff, doing lots of stuff for social media and blah, blah, blah. In fact, Andre, give us a bit of introduction to you and what you've been up to the last 10 days.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Andre, and I work for Tennis Canada. And in case people didn't know, Tennis Canada is the owner of the National Bank Open presented by Rogers, former Rogers Cup in Montreal and Toronto. And the Tennis Canada staff works pretty much around the clock during the week of the tournament and a few weeks before. So yeah, I've been at the National Bank Open in Montreal, at the ATP Tour, and yeah, I was just posting stuff on social. I was doing things on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and just kind of like trying to cover matches, get pictures and get videos and things like that. There's a really cool reel of Felix walking on court, his first walk on against Nishioka,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of like had like a bunch of angles of him coming in like from the door to the tunnel and to the court. And the first image that you see, that's my camera. So that's me
Okay,
like holding
great.
my camera on it. So like it's on Instagram somewhere. Like you have to scroll down at this point because there is a crap ton of content. So yeah, I've been at Tennis Canada for about a year, and I've been in here and I really enjoy it. But it is definitely a lot of work.
Talking a lot of work, I'm just going to share right now an image that you put on your personal Twitter account, actually. What is your personal Twitter account, by the way?
It's at Rolenberg Andre.
Cool. So you posted these three images,
Yeah.
two of Hugo Gaston there and one of Casper Ruud. Of course, Casper Ruud making the semi-finals, if I'm right,
Yeah.
in Montreal. The tournament's coming so thick and fast; it's always difficult to keep up. But you highlighted in this tweet that actually taking pictures or sports images in particular, is so tricky. Why do you
Yeah.
say that?
Because it's a lot of camera settings, and you have to kind of keep an eye on the player because things happen really fast, and you have to kind of make a decision of commitment. So for Gaston, he was like really close to the fence at this point. Like I was in the side court, it wasn't center court. I think I was doing even a quality match at that point, so I had a little bit more chances to get close. And what happens is that I had to commit. I had to kind of point the camera at him and just kind of start taking pictures. And my camera isn't obviously like a professional level camera. Is if you people are knowledgeable in cameras, it's a Sony A6000, which is now not manufactured anymore. It's a camera that dates back from like 2013, I think. So it has limited capabilities in contrast to what we have today. So yeah, I had to just kind of like trust a little bit of like my settings and how we were, and um, kind of pointed the cameras and trust that the focus is going to land on the player because they're moving really fast as well. The camera is not really as powerful as like a pro camera, so the focus can get a little tricky. So like sometimes you look at your screen and you think they really got a good shot, but then you put it in your computer and it's dark or it's like slightly out of focus. So it's just like
Yeah.
it's just it can be frustrating because sometimes you get like on the heat of the moment, you see your camera and you're like, wow, I got a really solid picture of like this moment. And then you look at your computer and you completely lost it. And it's just like, it's just very tricky. Like, so yeah, it's of course like sports photography depends a lot on like the commitment and the eye and just knowing the sport that you're photographing. So for example, um, I saw that not Bonzi, Gaston was walking towards the fence, so I just immediately turned my camera towards him because I knew that he was gonna like pick up his towel. It was gonna take a little while, so I knew that I was gonna get a chance of like getting the first picture, that the biggest one over there. Um, and I knew he was a lefty, so I positioned myself in a way that I was gonna get most of like him like facing the camera, in
Yeah.
that moment. So that's like knowing the sport part, but of course like the equipment in sports photography is is basically a must. Like if you don't have like the proper equipment, it's going to be really hard to take like pictures that are like going to be satisfying and they're going to meet the requirements if you're shooting professionally, especially at an event at this level.
Andre, when you're working, and this is something I'm also thinking about as well, because I'm at the beginning of my time, experiencing tennis, if you like, in a semi-professional capacity, and I hope that it doesn't take away from the enjoyment that I've held over the last 3 decades, if you like, of watching the sport. When you're there watching, and but you're also working, particularly over the last 10 days, do you still get to enjoy a lot of the tennis, or are you so focused on your job that sort of matches can sometimes pass you by?
It's a little bit of both. Like in social media, I would say that there's a lot of opportunity to kind of try to make sneak in both at the same time. So like if you last year, for example, it was a COVID year, so our tournament was mostly closed. We just had like
Okay.
center court seats available, and it was only about 50% capacity.
Hmm.
So we didn't have as much to cover outside. So I had a chance to just kind of like grab my phone and just kind of go over to the stadium. And I was communicating with the WTA at the point, just kind of like, oh, I would like to have this point so that I can post on social. But I was watching the match live, so I could like just be on stadium and do stuff. But this year, kind of, we had a lot more things to like juggle. So our team got a few more divisions. So most of the time, I just spent on the in the office, just kind of like doing my things as I just had to do. And yeah, it's sometimes you will miss moments, of course, because you do have obligations that you have to meet, and there are things that you just can't really not do because it's either sponsored content or it's like something in the heat of the moment that you have to do. Like for example, you have to post a match point winning moment, so you might you might lose the interviews, or you might lose the first few games of a match because you're taking care of like updating other courts, things like that. So you will miss a few moments. Sometimes you will miss great moments, but you can enjoy a lot of tennis as well. And I don't think that in the end of the day it takes much away like from the enjoyment. You get really tired of working, but if you
Hmm.
can just like relax, there's a massive difference between like watching tennis for work and watching tennis when you're relaxing. Because and you notice that, like for example, now I watched since yesterday. I watched the Murray Wawrinka match, which is absolutely
Hmm.
out of my scope. Like it doesn't matter to me, like for my work at all, especially in this week. And I was just like watching it for fun, and it's just like, well, this is tennis. It's great to watch tennis by myself, and I don't have to worry about like getting the right moments and communicating about anybody. I can just like watch it, and it's pretty unchanged. Like it didn't take anything away from my enjoyment of watching tennis. What it does sometimes is it kind of makes you feel like you want to do something else after the tournament just for a bit. I want to take like a day or two off and just like watch as little tennis as possible, like do something else, like watch a movie, just to kind of like decompress. But I don't think it if you really like tennis, I don't think it's going to matter too much. You might find yourself like wanting to do something else other than working tennis because let's face it, it's not for everybody. But I don't think you're gonna stop liking it. Yeah,
Yeah, right. I mean, I think you're not going to stop liking it. But it's interesting how you had a few hours off and you were already back into the sport, so to speak,
yeah.
with this, and it's great because obviously that match last night between Wawrinka and Murray. Just give me I actually unfortunately didn't get to see it. Just
Oh,
give me a quick 2 minutes on what you thought of that match with two of these aging stars of the game.
well, I guess it said it. Aging stars of the game is just the perfect way to put it. They still got the shots. Like you can see that Murray has flashes of incredible returning that is absolutely ridiculous. Some of his gets are
Hmm.
amazing, but he's obviously like lost a bit of a bit of like the sharpness that he used to have. His movement isn't exactly as it used to be. At some point in the match, he started cramping, which is obviously normal. Like kids cramp as well, like Runa did, like I think in last year.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
Medvedev as
yeah,
well. I remember in the
yeah,
US a couple of years ago.
exactly. So yeah, it happens, but for these guys, like I feel like it happens a little bit more often than they would like to, and they're not exactly able to bring their games to the level they used to be, and it frustrates them. You can see in Murray's face a lot more than you see in Wawrinka, but you see in Wawrinka as well. And Wawrinka, you can clearly see that he's a slower dude now.
Yeah.
He has a lot less pace in his shots during a rally. So like now, if you catch like the matches that he played with Djokovic in 2014, he can smash that backhand from essentially anywhere on the court. Nowadays, he kind of needs a bit more space. So like,
Yeah.
and it's still lovely to watch them play. Like it's, you have to understand just where they are at. Like you're not going to be watching like a Grand Slam final with them like the highest piece possible level that they used to, but you still get like a lot of great points. So it's still enjoyable. Like it's still something that I really like, and I still root for them. It was really hard to see one of them losing in this match.
Yeah. We've obviously got a big match coming up this evening with the ends of the career, if you
Yeah.
like, with Serena Williams facing off against Emma Raducanu. But I want to come back to Canada now in general, and I'd like to tell me your thoughts on the tournament as a whole. I mean, let's start with the beginning. I mean, really, we had the beginning was like 24 hours before the draw. You're working there, so how did you feel when you heard that Rafa wasn't going to make it? Rafa Nadal, I should say.
Well, we were just essentially bracing for complaints. Essentially, in this moment, it's just like for us in the tournament, it's always like, oh crap, like he's not gonna be here. Like our social content is gonna take a hit because obviously Nadal, like you just put like him doing whatever and you get like 1,000 likes right away. So it's obviously something that was like, oh man, like we could have a lot of reach. So it is sad. It is frustrating. For an essentially business part, it's just like, oh man, that sucks. And but the worst part is definitely the complaints that we get, because a player that drops out of the draw like right away, especially like it's Nadal, like he sold a lot of tickets. We're actively promoting him. So
I mean, sorry,
when he,
just to quickly say, your tournament director, I remember saying about 3 weeks before the tournament, we've sent him balls, he's got his hotel booked, flights, and all the rest of it.
He actually did all of that, but it just decided last minute that he didn't want to come. So
but that's
what
tennis.
can we do?
What can you do? Yeah, I mean,
and especially if it's Nadal, he gets to do whatever he wants at this point in his life. So
absolutely. And I mean, to be honest with you, the other thing happens is he turns up and he gets injured, and then he misses the rest of the season, and he's obviously got to take care of himself. Or of course, as we saw at Wimbledon, he obviously pulled out before his semi-final. So, but that's the nature of the business. It's an individual sport. It's not like a football match or soccer or American football or whatever, baseball, where these things go on. Anyway, so he pulls out. And then on day one, I think it's day one, certainly the first round anyway, we had Alcaraz, Medvedev, and you're going to have to fill in the third one, Tsitsipas, the top 3 seeds all falling. And I think it's the first time at that stage of a Masters 1000 in many, many years that had occurred. Again, what are you thinking? Because actually, to be honest with you, I think with an absence of the big 3, and with the big 3 I include obviously Federer and Djokovic there, I think with those 3 absent, probably Alcaraz has got a bit of a special allure at the moment, but whether Medvedev or Kyrgios goes through, it's still exciting. You know, whether Tsitsipas goes out, I don't know if that makes any difference. What were your thoughts after that round 1 situation, or round 2, I guess it was, if it's a Masters?
It was a round 2 because they have a bye on the first round, and it was on a Tuesday, and on Monday it rained a lot, if you remember that. So so we had a bunch of delays, and on the seeds, it's kind of like the same situation as Nadal in a sense. Like it's obviously like they played, so we can't really do anything about it. Like they came here, and people get frustrated because they buy tickets for the semis thinking that their favorites are going to get there, and it's just like, well, you know that they can lose, so it's not our fault at all. Like it's not that the Nadal one is our fault either, but it hits different for the fan. But yeah, it's a little frustrating because like these guys still have some star power, and we have to make do with what we got. We know that tennis is it is what it is, and it's sports. And as a tennis fan myself, I'm really happy for Pablo Carreño Busta that he won his first Masters. He wasn't seeded, and he's slightly less known than the other guys are. Obviously, probably like just people in the tennis sphere that would actually know who he is and what he did. But the regular fan would know Tsitsipas's name, or Medvedev, or Alcaraz. Obviously, like he's becoming a superstar. So it's something that, again, business wise, it makes it hard for us to like promote the event now or the next year. But it's not the end of the world, right? So like we still like are selling tennis, and we are just still like saying like, hey, you know, these guys are playing really well. So the ones that beat him, like they're playing well. So you can come and see like incredible tennis. Maybe you're gonna get to find a new person to cheer for, you know. And Tommy Paul played amazing. He was incredible during the week. So
Yeah, I mean there were some incredible matches, and so if we sound a bit down on the tournament in terms of the seeds crashing out early and obviously Rafa not making it, actually I think actually on the court there were some classic matches. I mean you mentioned Tommy Paul there against Alcaraz in particular in that second round. That was an unbelievable match. The final itself was lived up to the billing for me, and we'll come to that in a minute. Were there any
Mhm.
other standout matches for you?
I particularly think that they what's his name? Hurkacz against Ramos Vinolas was pretty intense. Like I thought he was really good. He saved match points in that match to come through into the into the semis. I think actually on that one was it the
Yeah,
quarter or semis? And in the Dan Evans Tommy Paul.
yeah,
What? No, actually, it was Dan Evans Carreño Busta match.
yeah, yeah.
That was really really good.
That was good. Yeah, three
It was a
sets. There's so many
yeah.
three setters.
Yeah. It tends to happen, I think, in Montreal. I don't know why, but yeah,
Yeah. I
but
mean,
yeah.
that was incredible. I also think that, yeah, I mean, you're right. Karenia Buster, it's a bit of a funny one in that I think even within the tennis world, those that know tennis a lot, they're not exactly tripping over themselves to support him or follow
Yeah.
him. But I have to say, as that final dragged on against Hurkacz, who had another great run, as he so often does in North America, at least,
Mm,
albeit it's his first time getting to a final in Montreal. Um, that I found the more that match went on, the more I was rooting for Carreño Busta. I was
mm,
really pleased for him, knowing how much he's been, criticized by let's say Nick Kyrgios, basically
yeah.
as being a clay court specialist. And at the end of the day, he's been in two hard court slam semifinals, and he's now a Masters 1000 winner. And then Kyrgios continues the social media stuff by just going down alleyways that have nothing to do with his original statement. I noticed that Kyrgios backs himself into a corner so often on various topics, and then actually just comes out with a completely different topic. He sort of mentions his head to head all of a
Mhm,
sudden against Carreño Busta. And anyway, that's Nick Kyrgios. Of course, he beat Medvedev, but ultimately goes out to Hurkacz. Tight first set, tie break, if I remember rightly, and tie breaks does seem to be an issue for Kyrgios. How, by the way, the crowds were great as well, packed houses most of the time. How do the Canadian fans take to Kyrgios, for example? Because he is a person who divides opinion.
he's a person that defines opinion, but he brings people on the court. Like we cannot deny that. Unfortunately, well, I mean, I say unfortunately, but yeah, of course he has a baggage with him. But like if and I don't like exactly the way that I'm saying here things, but like in the sense that like if you just take Kyrgios as a person who is a tennis player, like a lot of people outside of tennis know him, but they don't know him like all the things that go through. Like for example, on Twitter is kind of like a community that is closed by the algorithm. So if you don't talk about tennis, you don't know about like all the things that happened to him in a sense. So for people who kind of are casual fans, they just know that Kyrgios is a guy who is a trickster. He likes to play like the underarm serve and like twinners,
Yeah,
and he fills the house. Like it doesn't matter like where he is, he will get like the courts very full, unless things happen that all of he does are actually like extremely terrible. Like suppose that his allegations, whatever. Like suppose that if something actually blows out, like out of the tennis world, it's most likely that he will feel maybe the house is a little less, or people are going to come in and start booing for him or something like that.
yeah,
But as it is right now, Kyrgios isn't. I guess he isn't much of as a celebrity as he maybe thinks he is, so that people don't necessarily know all of the things that come through in his personal life. So for the tournament, it's actually great that he goes all the way because, well, maybe not to the final because that would be or a winner rather because that is a little tricky for us to promote. But if he gets to the semis, oh, it's awesome because like semis tickets are more expensive, and he filled. He was actually supposed to go on. I think it was on Wednesday. He was supposed to go on center court, but his match got moved because of rain. He got moved to Rogers Court. He played Deminor on that court,
okay. Mm-hmm.
and I have never seen, well, in my life in Montreal, I've never seen that court as full as he was at that
Okay.
time.
Yeah.
He sold out the secondary court. It's just like is Nick Kyrgios. So um I can't really say much about him in the sense like he's great for a tournament. Like it is the reality. Like it doesn't matter how people don't want to accept this. it's still the reality that Kyrgios will sell tickets. He is right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he makes things like that. They don't last. Like just let him be. I guess like he's his own type. Like whatever. Like for me, it's just I don't feel like any need to engage or to keep taking digs at him. Like we all know the response is going to be. We all know that what he's going to say next. So like for me, it's like completely unnecessary. If there's anything going on in his like personal life that gets to like legal action, that's even less of my business. Like
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
like do anything about it. Like whatever. Like it's my opinions are my opinions in a sense.
Yeah, I think we both really, although we've both got very different commitments regarding tennis, come to a similar conclusion. He puts bums on seats. He's entertaining. He's an excellent tennis player.
Yeah.
So, regarding on the court, some of the things he does, I think, are great. I remember him. When he asks, I think he did it last week at least once, where he says, "Where shall I serve?" And he asks a member of the crowd. That's
Yeah.
great. That's fun. I love that Nick Kyrgios. I love the Nick Kyrgios we saw in Washington a couple of years ago when he's high fiving people in the crowd.
Mm.
I don't even mind a little bit of the other stuff, like when he says there's a girl in the audience that's annoying him and she's had 700 drinks, as he said at Wimbledon. That's okay. That's fine. I can understand him getting a bit annoyed with somebody in the crowd, and if he says 700 drinks, so
Yeah.
be it. Unfortunately, he also oversteps the mark on the court anyway, sometimes with his opponent and respect. And he's also the first person to talk about respect. And I get it. He's got a point when it comes to respect, and he deserves respect from the crowd in terms of not getting abused, for example. But he's also somebody who will offer abuse from his side um, to umpires and officials, and that's frustrating and disappointing. Then we come to the other side as well, which is obviously what's going on domestically for him in Australia with the upcoming trial that he has to deal with. That's a legal issue. I will let those people deal with that as and when that comes to it. But back to the tennis court, because that's what we're here to talk about. You also said to me that you have commitments for, I guess, Tennis Canada at both the Davis Cup and Billie Jean Cup. What have they entailed in the past? And of course, we've got the Davis Cup coming up in a couple of months from now.
Yeah, so Team Canada is well, the Davis Cup is something that is built by the federation. So like we put a team together. Well, we try to put a team together. We can like send them invitations and just say like, "Hey, you would not come," and that's the reason why sometimes like um, Felix and Chapo won't. But they also have their own commitments and their own lives, and but yeah. So like that's what Tennis Canada does for Davis Cup. We bring the team, and we are responsible for their media commitments and for covering their matches and just just kind of hyping them up. And that's why like I've been to the Davis Cup last year in Madrid, which well I was essentially just kind of doing social as well as just posting articles on social media. I wasn't necessarily writing the articles, but I was like editing and just putting them up and just making stories and Instagram posts and Facebooks, all the jazz, and just trying to like just kind of hype them up a bit, making them do games and things like that on for social, for reels and things like that. And for the Billie Jean King Cup this year was a little bit more of a commitment because we held it in Vancouver. So that means that we are putting that event together. So like we
Yeah.
we were treating that as like a mini tournament, as we would say. Like we called the Montreal and the Toronto tournaments the tournament for us because it's kind of like our thing. So the Billie Jean King Cup in Vancouver was the mini tournament because it was very similar in that we had the matches to organize and we had to promote for tickets and we had to hype the players. So yeah, that's essentially what we do. We have more access and we have more say, I guess, in what happens. But yeah,
Cool. And so are you going to be coming to Europe again for the Davis Cup in a few weeks?
I hope so.
Okay,
I don't
cool.
know
Well,
yet. So yeah.
let's see how that goes. We've had a few Davis Cup announcements today. I saw Djokovic confirm that he will be playing for Serbia, among others. But as you say, I noticed that Nadal won't be playing for Spain, and I've seen, as you said, one or two other top players don't make it. I mean, there's a completely separate podcast that we could do for about 2 or 3 hours just on the calendar, I think, alone,
Oh yeah.
and how we have a largely singles, of course we have doubles as well, but a largely single sport in terms of popularity, and how we fit team events into that. I personally, and you probably less in a position to comment on this because of your work commitments, Andre, but I personally would like to see at the most one big team event per year. I would also be interested in perhaps even exploring just doing one every 4 years for the Olympics, making that the team event, if you like, and really focusing on that. And then you get, one team wins a gold medal, much as they would do in the Davis Cup if they won it. But at least I do think that the ATP Cup that we have just ahead of the Australian Open, to me, seems a bit. We've just, you've just had the Davis Cup a few weeks or a few months before, and then we're going into the Australian Open, and we've got this other team tournament. I think it's one too many at the very least. But as I say, that's for a separate podcast. Listen, you touched on Canada and obviously Felix and Chapo as well. On the men's side, actually, let's just quickly talk about Felix and how you thought he did in in Montreal. Was it a successful tournament? I mean, he seemed to sort of be a bit glum as he went out, and he did a social media post sort of apologizing for going out, and how sad he was, at least for going out. What were your thoughts on his tournament?
Well, he had a great tournament up until the match, right, in the quarterfinals. Like, he played fantastic tennis. The way he beat Nori was ridiculous. Like, he played like peak Felix at that moment. Like, I don't think he can play that much better than he did then. Like, maybe the fifth set that he played against Nadal in the Roland Garros was one that comes to mind as like his peak level. But I guess like he's playing at home. He's from Montreal, so like he I think he grew up like 20 minutes away from like where the center is, like so where the stadium is, something like that. So he probably felt a bit of pressure. He maybe didn't play as well as he would have liked. Obviously, he understood that Casper Ruud played phenomenal tennis, like right from the gate. So yeah, like I feel like it was a successful tournament for him, like to get as far as he did. Like obviously, like he had a bye and then he played like 2 great matches. He got the crowds pretty riled up. So I think we can see what Felix is capable of, and I think we can see that in the future he's going to be able to like pull up better performances, and if not reach the semifinals and the finals, like he's going to definitely be more competitive like in the future. I'm fully sure.
I think he's just desperate to win. He's just desperate to win there, isn't he? Because it's his home tournament, and it's only there every 2 years. Of course, it alternates with Toronto, so he may only get sort of 5 or 6 bites at the cherry, and this is one of them, if you like.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I feel like it's the pressure might have gotten to him, but yeah, I would definitely say that it was overall a successful tour. This is gonna look back to and look. This match that he's played, he's probably gonna like want to like look at it and learn from it. But like the other 2 that he played, he never got as far as the quarterfinals in Montreal before, so it's definitely a success for him.
Cool, yeah, and I think for Felix, I do think that he would because he's had a pretty solid year. I mean, he's kind of gone out. I mean, in other times he's been really up and down. I think he's got a bit more consistent this year. His grass court season will have disappointed him a little bit, not to have at least picked up a title, and certainly not to have gone further than the first round at Wimbledon. But his draw was brutal. I do think, though, obviously won his first title in Rotterdam at the beginning of the year or just after the Australian Open. I do think he'd like to add to that, though, somehow. If, for example, he had an amazing run at the US Open, or he managed to pick up a Masters 1000 or something like this. I don't know where he stands in the race, but he's probably quite far along, and he should make that ATP finals. I think he would like to add something to the year to make it a successful year, whether that be a Masters 1000 or an incredible run at the US Open, because we've had him on the tour for 3, 4, 5 years, and he's shown us sparks. He's maybe disappointed us on 1 or 2 occasions just because he's that type of player, in terms of that he does have an aggressive style. We just need to find a bit of consistency in it, and he's kind of found it this year. It's a pity the way he went out. Obviously, I think it was to Dan Evans, wasn't it? Was it Dan Evans he went out to?
Was Casper Ruud.
Casper Ruud, sorry, yeah. Casper Ruud, obviously, who made the semi-finals there. Yeah, that will have disappointed him because it seemed such a flat display. And as you say, maybe the pressure got to him. Talking of which, I think we can't finish our talk about men's Canadian tennis at least without talking about Shapovalov. And the year he has been largely rotten, I would say, and particularly since that Australian Open quarterfinal, losing to Nadal when arguably he could have won that match in the fifth set. Nadal was struggling with health issues and managed to pull through as only Nadal can, but many may well believe that Shapovalov threw that away in so many ways, especially with some of the decision making. And then he's been on this run, which I know he won yesterday, didn't he? Did
Yeah,
you see his match, or did you cover anything to do with this match yesterday? Did you see anything
I
of his
didn't get to
matches?
see this match. I think, well, I just got to see the results like when I woke up this
Yeah.
morning. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the
Mhm.
same as well. And the reason we're wow is because he's been on a streak of I think losing 8 matches out of 9, which, funny enough, Nadal is also involved in because the streak began, if you like, after he beat Rafa in Rome, albeit a Rafa who was struggling with his foot, and then he goes on this streak, which also encompasses his part of the season. I would say both him and Felix probably look at the grass court season, especially Wimbledon, as being two players who would like to go far in that tournament and did go far last year in 2021. But what's your view on Shapovalov and his year?
I think Shapovalov has kind of like this tricky characteristic to him. Like he gets really fired up and he plays really well, or he sometimes can get a little bit flat. And I think that's similar, like a thing that's normal to him, and he's been trying to like work through it. We've been seeing that. Like I think even if the fact that he went down to sets to love and then came back to fifth set, I think it's really great to showcase like how he's been working on that and how he's been allowing himself to like get back into matches that he would have probably normally lost like 2 years ago. He played well in the ATP Cup as well, but I think it's just like me going through a bit of a transition period. He has had a few coaches not too long
Mm-hmm.
ago, like maybe in the course of a year. So he's trying to
Yeah,
find a balance between consistency and his aggressive style, which is can be overly aggressive, which is maybe can make him miss a few more balls. But if he's like playing too consistency, he's like really not going like for shots that he would have normally made a winner off. Like he just kind of like allows the opponent to stay in rallies when they shouldn't be anymore. So I think for Chapo is this year in particular, ever since like well, I guess ever since really the Australian Open has been just really discovery. I think he's been trying to find like himself on court, and I don't know if he's found himself yet. He did get a really good win over Dimitrov, so that was his last
yeah,
one. So
yeah,
it's good signs that he's still got the tennis. So we'll have to. I think for Chapo is still a game of wait and see. Like let's see what he's gonna do in the future. Let's see how he's gonna control himself and his fire and his aggression on court.
yeah.
And it's just yeah, it's just really Chapo for you.
As Ashley says, finally. I mean, he's. Actually, I wish I could remember which was his one win. I think he did get past the first round at Wimbledon.
Yeah.
So I don't know who he beat in the first round there, but that will have been his one win, I think, in that series of 9 matches until beating Dimitrov last night. And Dimitrov obviously is a very, very good player. And so that's good. And maybe that'll set him up to have a nice run at the US Open, if not in Cincinnati. Let's switch over to the women. Could you pay any attention? I mean, you're basically working night and day in Montreal. Meanwhile, exactly the same time, there's a women's tournament going on in Toronto, a Masters 1000. Did you see any of that, or do you have any opinions on that anyway?
I have barely seen anything from Toronto. Obviously, the matches were going on at the same time, so you couldn't really get much to it, and definitely had to focus on the ATP in Montreal. But I got to see a bit of like just the results, and I saw a bit of the final between Haddad Maya and Simona Halep.
Sure.
And Yeah, like in terms of the Canadians, again, I think the pressure may have gotten to Fernandez again. She won her first match and she lost to the finalist. She lost to Haddad Maya, which is like in retrospect, it looks kind of really good in a sense, like
Yeah.
the way that she was playing. But I'm not sure. I think good signs for Andreescu. Leila, in a sense, like growing up still, she's only 19. I think she's gonna get better. And she's also just trying to find her game, coming back from a foot injury as well. Maybe has something to do with her movement. I'm not entirely sure of what to say. Mostly for Toronto, I think it might be a bit of a waiting game as well for them. But I think that they're mostly giving up the better results. I would say, like in terms of they're being more consistent. I would say. I think Leila, we can always expect her to win at least a couple of matches in every tournament she plays. Of course, she didn't do it like the best two. She lost her opening round in Cincinnati, and she lost in the second round, in the third round because she had a. Did she have a bye? I don't think she had a bye, but she
No.
lost in the second round in Toronto. So, but yeah, I'm pretty sure that she's gonna bounce back and she's gonna win a couple. I'm not worried
Yeah.
about that. And
I've
same
got the
for
top.
yeah,
Let's go on.
yeah.
Go on. We're going to say, Andre.
Go on. Oh no, I was
I've got
gonna
the.
say
Go on. Yeah.
yeah, I was just gonna say that Andres kind of the same thing. She's finding herself again from mental health issues that she's had, and
Mm.
I think she still got the game. She just kind of needs to find it again.
Yeah, she had a few months off, I think, at the beginning of the year, didn't she? I
Yeah.
think maybe, but it's great to see her back. And it's funny. These both of these players, Leila Fernandez and Bianca Andreescu, two Canadians, there have a love affair of some description with the US Open because Leila made the final there last year with an incredible run. So many three setters, so many comeback victories, so many tight matches, so many matches that looked like she was on the verge of defeat, but ultimately prevailing in. And I think, in a way, it's interesting that the match she lost, I think, in Cincinnati yesterday, I think it was. I'm trying to remember where I am and what time zone I'm in. But she was, I think, was she up a break in the first set and a break also in the second set? Basically, she was kind of the front runner at various points of that match. And yeah, it seems as though she's really good with her back against the wall, and when she's really got to fight and get herself out of a hole, if you like, or that's how it certainly was at the US Open. But perhaps, maybe where there'd been a bit more expectation. I heard Maria Sakkari talking about this as well a couple of weeks ago, that she's found it a bit difficult with now, having the expectation. Carlos Alcaraz as well touched upon it after he went out last week in Toronto, that he was in a position where he probably should have won that match against Tommy Paul when he was in a commanding position. And it's a different kind of pressure. And of course, the pressure that Sakkari and Alcaraz and also Fernandez are under as well, that now sometimes we're going into tournaments and we expect them to win. And that's a tricky pressure to deal with. Fernandez has all the tools, all the talent that I expected to come back at some point with all guns firing. And I'd love to see it at the US Open, given how well she did there last year. Raducanu, of course, has had a similar 12 months to Fernandez. It's funny how those two players have had very similar, 12 months. They both had a couple of times out of the game injured. Of course, Fernandez is just coming back from an injury. So, yeah, have you met Fernandez, by the way, Leila?
I've briefly talked to her during the Billie Jean
Okay.
King Cup in Vancouver. So, but yeah, she's a really nice girl.
Yeah, exactly. Multilingual, seems very grounded as well, and seems to have a great background. Andreescu, obviously she won in 2019, but it's been 3 years, I guess, now since that Slam final. And again, she's somebody who sort of looks like she's gonna, okay, here we go. And then, I think at the US Open last year, I thought, the thing is with women's tennis, it's so tricky because one minute you're knocking out this former Slam winner and you're coming up against another, or one minute you're playing the world number one and maybe you get through that, but then you're up against the person who's on a winning streak of 20 matches or whatever, and so you've got so many people to get through that I think winning a Slam now from on the women's side is just insane. That look, just looking at the top six there, you may well have to beat 2 or 3 of those en route to winning a major, and you may well have already come through Serena Williams and Emma Raducanu on the way as well. So it's tricky, but it's good to see Simona Halep and you said you saw a bit of the final, right?
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
I think Simona Halep is playing great. I think that she did like the game that she normally does really well. She served really well too, like for her height. The fact that she can spot serve at times and get herself out of trouble is really impressive. I also particularly liked her aggressive style. I think she, at times in the tournament, she was really relying on being just very like defensive and just kind of like getting balls back in play. But I guess it's part of the process. Like she's probably like trying to find her best tennis again. But in the final, I think there were moments in which it just like wasn't playable because she not only would not miss, but she was actually being incredible like counter puncher in the aggressive style, like sometimes ripping the forehand as well. She obviously doesn't have the same power as some players like even like I don't know Badosa or Swiatek, but she comes up with like a good like balance between like when to attack and when to defend and when to keep the rally going. And when she is able to just choose the best moments really to like attack. So yeah.
Yep, exactly. And her now going back in the top 10 for the first time in a while there and shooting up to number 6, 9 places as we see. It's funny though the rankings this year. I mean, someone like Sakurai really, who's been kind of off the boil for quite a few months, still there in third, but she's going to obviously lose a lot of points if she doesn't have a good run at the US Open because she made the semi-finals there last year. On Jabeurs had a pretty good year. In fact, I'd say she had a very good year. And actually, I don't remember which round she made at the US Open, but it wasn't deep last year. So she'll be looking at making up some ground. Obviously, Iga has long gone in the distance in terms of the rankings for the foreseeable future. And I don't see her being usurped before the end of the year. Andre, any final thoughts on either Canadian tennis or even just the upcoming US Open?
I think the US Open is a lot of make or break for a lot of people. It's the last slam of the year. That's the last spot where they really want to do well. Like, of course, like we still have like a few big tournaments after that, but like before then, it's like the US Open is like every tournament is basically a warm up towards a tournament, and after that, there's the tournaments are basically warm ups towards the finals, which is just the 8 first people qualify. So yeah, like the US Open is like your last chance to make it big. So like in a year. So I feel like a lot of players are trying to get themselves pumped for it and trying to work through their injuries and fatigue from the rest of the year, because the fact that the US Open is the last slam also means that they're already sustained injuries and there's a lot of matches on their backs at this point. In terms of the Canadians, I think they're all like hard courts. We essentially only have hard courts in Canada, and it's North America, so we know that there's a lot of people from Canada that go down to New York to watch the tennis there. So I do think that they will try the ultimate best to like do well in this slam, even if it breaks them like before the end of the season, which tends to happen more often than we would like. But I think that especially for Layla, she will definitely want to replicate her form from last year, and even who knows, maybe lift the trophy this time. It's obviously not an easy task. It wasn't easy last year. But
Oh, it's something I'd love to see. I mean, I was enthralled by both her and Emma Raducanu's story of getting to the final last year, and I'd love to see a repeat from Layla and maybe even go one step further and winning it. Maybe it's just coming a bit too soon with this fairly lengthy spell out of the game. I think it was about 3 months without playing, something like that. I think she played at the French Open and then she didn't play again until probably last week, I guess. So that's a fairly lengthy spell out of the game. But I'd hope to see her back, and I just wonder if this tournament might come a bit too soon for her. But who knows? She's a fighter, so anything's possible. Andre, listen, thank you very much for joining me today. It was great having some of your insights, both from the recent Masters tournament in Montreal and just your overall thoughts on Canadian tennis and tennis as a whole. Just one more thing. Where can we get you again on Twitter?
It's at Rolenberg Andre, and if you want to follow my podcast, no, don't want to do any competition, just friendly stuff. But it's at Tennis and Bagels,
Cool,
with an L. Which, by the way, there's a fake account going on. If you find it, report it. They have hateful comments. It's kind of easy to spot. But yeah,
how do we spell that? So I'm just going to write it in the live chat as well. So it's tennis, obviously tennis, and then is it and written as and, or is it the
no? It's just the AND, because like Twitter doesn't allow special characters.
Oh, okay. So it's tennis and bagels, and bagels spelled the regular way. I'm going to put it in the live chat right now, like so. Is that right?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not. That wasn't too bad. So can find you at Tennis and Bagels as well on an excellent podcast there. Yes, and anywhere else?
No, that's pretty much it for now.
Pretty much it for now. You've got plenty on your plate. You certainly have had plenty on your plate over the last 10 days, and maybe a bit more as the year to come. Listen, Andre, it's great to have you on board, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Same. Thank you so much for having me on.
Cheers, Andre. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.